Good evening, and welcome to our musical celebration in memory of Rebecca Luker. It will raise critically needed funds for ALS research. I'm Steve Schoenberg, Broadway contributor for NBC New York. I'm also the Director of Communications at Target ALS. Tonight is in memory of one of Broadway's most celebrated leading ladies. Maybe you were already a fan, but even if you didn't know who Rebecca Luker was, you still knew her in some way. She was as recognizable as the people loved in your own life. On stage, she played iconic roles like Maria in The Sound of Music, Marion the librarian in The Music Man, and Lily in The Secret Garden. She was incredibly hardworking and committed to her job, putting the lead in Leading Lady. But she could also be playful, thriving on mischief, and the first one ready to tell a dirty joke. A loving stepmother, friend, neighbor, and mentor, Rebecca delighted in hearing about others and engaging in her community. She wasn't afraid to share the limelight, to genuinely celebrate others' successes, and she had no qualms about standing her ground and speaking up against injustice. When Rebecca passed away from complications of ALS in December of last year, it wasn't just a loss to the theater community, it was a loss to the world at large. Rebecca's experience with ALS serves as a reminder that this disease can affect anyone, and it ripples throughout their lives and the lives of those they touch. Thank you for being here tonight as we remember a person who set an example to so many. Thank you for joining in this fight against an awful disease. Together, we can realize a world in which no one dies of ALS. Now, without further ado, I give you our special tribute honoring Rebecca Luker, titled Becca.
not to dream about me. How could I ever know? How could I ever know? Forgive me, can you forgive me and hold me in your heart and find some new way to love me now that we're apart? How could I know I would never hold you, never again in this world? But oh, sure as you breathe, I am there inside you. How could I know? Tell me who could I know? Ever to know you will ever leave me. Could I ever How could I ever
Good evening, I'm Frank DeLella, host of Spectrum News New York One's On Stage, and I'm also the host for this evening, but first and foremost, I stand here as a fellow fan of Rebecca Luker's. Rebecca was one of my musical theater idols. I will never forget the first time I interviewed her, how she walked into the station so unassuming, so gracious, so approachable. On the surface, she seemed like this ethereal singing goddess, but once you got to know Becca, you appreciated her because she was a force to be reckoned with, and the kindest, most compassionate person that you could ever imagine. Tonight we're going to celebrate Becca's life, the many aspects of her humanity, and yes, her voice. There was nothing like Becca's voice, and I'm not just talking about her glorious soprano. Becca used her voice figuratively and literally. At every opportunity she spoke her truth, and she inspired many people, especially her fellow performers in the theater community. Tonight we will hear from some of her friends, her leading men, her colleagues, her neighbors, and women she mentored. Because as we will see, Becca paved the way for an entire generation of sopranos. Even as things got really tough for her towards the end, Becca managed to find comfort and inspiration in music. Here now to pay tribute to Becca's love of music with a special arrangement of How Can I Keep From Singing, our Tony Award winner Victoria Clark and composer Jeff Blumenkrantz.
My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the clear though far off hymn that hails a new creation. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since love is Lord of heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing? Through all the tumult storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since love is Lord of heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing? How can I keep from singing?
Rebecca was one of the first people to sing my music. She championed emerging writers, and she gave the most transparent performances.
We wanted to remember Becca and to honor her work and to celebrate her life by singing this song, because I really feel in a way this was the theme, the thread that ran through her life, as she really lived to sing. Jeff and I both had the privilege of looking in on Becca through the last weeks and months of her life and visiting with her. And one of the things that we spoke about a lot was how music had sustained her and was her fuel and her food and her energy. And she wanted to talk about singing a lot. She is completely fearless. She will try anything. She's completely collaborative. I'm speaking of her in the present tense because she still is that. She still is. She's an is right now for me and probably always will be.
In addition to being a wonderful collaborator to share the stage with, Becca was also the most loyal of friends. A compassionate listener, Becca was inherently trustworthy. You knew you could tell her anything, and with her closest friends, the bond went beyond words. From the moment she and Sally Wilfert met, they knew that they were kindred spirits, cut from the same cloth. They could communicate without speaking to each other. They instinctively knew what the other was going to do, especially when they were singing together. Becca and Sally created a duo show called All the Girls, which celebrated their friendship. Becca's longtime friend and music director Joe Thalkin served as the music director, pianist, and contributed a suite of original songs for the women to sing. All the Girls became Becca's final album. Sally and Joe are here now tonight to reflect upon their longtime friendships with Becca.
I first met Rebecca Luker when we were doing a reading of a new musical called The Mistress Cycle. And we were instant friends because I said I was going to go to the bathroom and she said, I'll go with you. And we went to the bathroom and we were both in separate stalls, and that's how our conversation began.
Becca really wanted to make the world a better place. I think it might stem also from her background in Alabama, which was not necessarily conducive to someone pursuing a life in the performing arts.
I was always so impressed with how politically minded she was, and she knew everything about every current event going on, and she remembered the names of every senator and congressman that would come on the news. And I was just in awe of that, and I learned so much from her. And we went on the Women's March together. When we were working on the last bits of All the Girls, when the CD was about to be released, it gave her such hope. It really buoyed her spirits, and she felt normal. She felt like she was really working again, and it took her mind off of what was going on around her and what was happening to her with the ALS. And it was a beautiful thing to see her come alive like that. The essence of Becca is the cup of life is half full, and that really was her until the very end. She was able to have hope, and she really, it gave her strength, and it gave her the grace in fighting something that was so challenging.
She never gave up. Till the very end, she never gave up the hope that she could get better.
So So often as I wait for sleep, I find myself reciting the words I've said or should have said, like scenes that need rewriting. The smiles I never answered, doors perhaps I should have opened, songs forgotten in the morning. I relive the roles I've played, the tears I may have squandered, the many pipers I have paid along the roads I've wandered. Yet all the time I knew it, love was somewhere out there waiting, though I may regret a kiss or two. If I had changed a single day, what went amiss or went astray, I may have never found my way to Yet all the time I knew it, love was somewhere out there waiting, though I may regret a kiss or two. If I had changed a single day, what went amiss or went astray, I may have never found my way to you. I wouldn't change a thing that happened on my way to
Music was incredibly important to Becca, and she was a very skilled musician with a classical background. At one point, she had intended to pursue a career in opera, but she fell in love with musical theater and musical theater with her when she was an apprentice at Michigan Opera Theater, playing Anne in A Little Night Music and Joanna in Sweeney Todd. With all of her extensive musical knowledge, Becca was open to learning more and trying something new. She actually learned to play the piccolo for the Music Man, and she learned to play the guitar so that she could lead the Von Trapp children in Do Re Mi during The Sound of Music. Of course, Becca is not the only Broadway soprano who got her start in the classical opera world, so it is my pleasure to introduce Becca's friend and fellow soprano, Tony Award winner Kristin Chenoweth, who will be singing the title song from The Sound of Music.
I go to the hills when my heart is lonely. I know I will hear what I've heard before. My heart will be blessed the sound of music, and I'll sing once more.
I remember several years ago being at the Kennedy Center Honors Tribute for Miss Julie Andrews, and as I stood in the wings and watched Rebecca Luker sing that song, and I looked up at Julie, and she stood crying, giving it to Rebecca, and I stood in the wings giving it to Rebecca. We're all still giving it to Rebecca. Rebecca, your legacy continues on. Your voice still rings true.
Many people remember seeing Rebecca Luker in her breakout role as Lily in The Secret Garden. Our next guest, two-time Tony Award nominee Howard McGillin, actually shared the stage with her for when he took over the role of Archibald Craven 3 months into the show's run. It was the beginning of a long friendship and collaboration that spanned decades. Howard and Becca went on to star in Time and Again together at the Old Globe and Where's Charlie at Encores. Those musicals might have been set in the Victorian era, but Becca's version of a Victorian heroine was anything but pure and meek. Howard remembers how Becca was fiercely focused on making changes in the world, and she was drawn to playing strong women who stood up against the constrictions of Victorian society. Becca knew how to stand up for herself in her own life as well. When Howard did concerts with Becca, often with their mutual friend Joe at the piano, he got to see her ferocity of strength in action.
So I had a great run with Rebecca. And since then, we developed a friendship and started to develop concerts together that we did around the country with Joseph Thalken, who is playing the piano for us today as well. Becca had enormous grit. She was one of the strongest people I knew. She, not just physically, she was in amazing shape and, fit as you can imagine, but she was also tenacious about her work. Her preparation for her work was always amazingly meticulous. Joseph Thalken and Barry Kleinbort wrote this beautiful song called Time for a workshop of a musical that I was involved in years ago. And as luck would have it, Becca soon found this song and it became a favorite of hers as well. Time is a song about memory. It's about a relationship that is being remembered. And I think in some ways that's why it has such poignance for me when I think of Danny and Becca. It's about the gap that exists between two people, whether two people are together or not, whether someone has passed on or not. There's still that connection that is there. There's a film that plays inside my head, full of things we did and words we said. We were both so young, didn't have a dime. All we had was plenty of time. But the world was sweet and life was fine, and the nights were warm as apple wine, and we shared a bed that was made for two, where at night I'd tell all my dreams to you, and you'd promise they would come true in time. I would depend on your warming touch. There was no end to your willing heart, and what I asked you would always do,
even when I knew what I asked might drive us apart in time. Now that leaves me here so far away, thinking how the two of us went astray. Still I close my eyes and the movie plays that remembers us in our prime, and I get to view me and you. In a time when all that we had was time.
When Becca received her ALS diagnosis, it would have been so easy for her to have played the victim, but she was a fighter to the very end. This disease literally took everything from her, and yet she was so optimistic. It was admirable to witness and watch, even though ultimately she was taken by this horrible disease. Becca's fight against ALS is similar to that of all patients currently affected by this disease. But thanks to the far-reaching ALS research community, there's hope on the horizon. Scientists are working tirelessly to better understand how this disease works and to identify potential drugs, all with the goal of discovering the first effective treatment for it. Here's a video with more.
Target ALS is really important, I think, because it exists to help others reach the goal of finding a treatment for ALS.
The way Target ALS approaches ALS research synergizes extremely well with the way that I think research ought to be done.
What they've done is provided a platform for basic science and translational science researchers to interact with those in the pharmaceutical industry and the biotech industry. You know, we all think very differently, and when you're kind of in your own silo with just people who are thinking about maybe very basic science, you don't know what's needed to actually get to patients.
These are complex problems that require people coming from lots of different angles to actually ultimately solve the problem.
Always active, Becca was a recognizable face all around her neighborhood. Our next guest, Tony Award winner Santino Fontana, can attest to that. Not only was he Becca's castmate in Cinderella, he was her neighbor, and he used to run into her all the time. But more than that, he looked up to Becca and her husband, 7-time Tony nominee Danny Burstein, as the folks who, thanks to the geography of their neighborhood, literally lived on the hill.
What can I say about Becca? I miss her. I would run into her all the time in the street because we were neighbors. And in Riverside Park, you know, going to, you know, on the subway, she would always, if I'd see her, you know, she would come up and grab my arm and rail about whatever was going on in the news. Everyone who knew her knew she was this, you know, liberal, open, passionate, funny. I think surprisingly funny. She was funny. Funny. And I also admired so much her relationship with Danny. Two actors, lovely, loved, celebrated, and clearly crazy about each other. So I've always thought of Becca and Danny, you know, as the couple that we aspire to be, and also the couple we could all love to watch love each other. And I'm singing Folks Who Live on the Hill, which is a song that she recorded. And it's also, I think, perfectly fitting for me to be singing tonight.
Many men with lofty aims strive for lofty goals. Others play at smaller games, being simpler souls. I am of the latter brand. All I want to do is to find a spot of land and live there with you. Someday we'll build a home on a hilltop high, you and I, shiny and new, a cottage that two can fill. When we'll be pleased to be called the folks who live on the hill. Someday we may be adding a thing or two, a wing or two. We will make changes as any family will, but we will always be called the folks who live on the hill. Our veranda will command a view of meadows green, the sort of view that seems to wanna be seen. And when the kids grow up and leave us, we'll sit and look at that same old view, just we two, Darby and Joan, who used to be Jack and Jill, the folks who like to be called what they have always been called, the folks who live on the hill.
Four-time Tony nominee Judy Kuhn has known Becca since they first worked together on a reading of the Barry Manilow musical Harmony back in the 90s. From the get-go, Judy loves singing with Becca, but she really got to connect with her when the two worked together at the Kennedy Center, first on Passion back in 2002, and most recently on Footloose, which sadly ended up being Becca's last show. Becca was struggling with the beginnings of her ALS symptoms, though she didn't know what it was at the time. She had a cane, which she had used on stage. But Judy remembers how Becca still managed to imbue her performance with grace and dignity, not letting anything stand in the way, inspired perhaps by the kindness that Becca always showed to everyone around her. When things got really tough during Becca's final weeks, Judy would visit Becca and just try to be there for her as a friend. And even then, Becca was looking out for the people around her, concerned about their well-being, when they were all there, obviously, to support Becca.
There were bells on the hill, but I never heard them ringing. No, I never heard them all around, but I never heard it singing. No, I never heard it at all till there was you. I never heard it at all till there was you.
When Judy Kuhn and Michael Cerveris look back on their experience doing Passion at the Kennedy Center with Becca, they both remember how she was so rigorous in the rehearsal room and so hilarious at the bar afterwards. Becca was completely focused on learning to sing the score perfectly and held herself to an unbelievably high standard in that regard. Yet she was so patient and gracious with the others as they were learning their music too. And after the rehearsal or the performance, she was ready to kick back, tell a joke, and make her colleagues laugh, a much-needed laugh, mind you, when doing such an intense show as Passion.
When Michael and I did Passion with Rebecca, I had really only known her from the things I'd seen her do on stage, and I knew her to be this warm, kind of angelic, kind of pure soul, which she was. But what I discovered when we started rehearsing Passion, that she was also wickedly funny and very irreverent. And I can remember, very earthy, very down to earth. And I can just remember there was a moment when she just said some zinger. And I looked at her and I was like, oh, that's who you are.
We're going to be great friends.
And it was such a joyful discovery that there was this whole other side of Becca that I hadn't seen and that I was being introduced to.
Often over cocktails later.
Often in the bar after rehearsal or the show, yes.
The role of Clara can, in the wrong hands, be a kind of a cipher and a can just be that idyllic, idealized woman, which she partly is. But what Rebecca brought so beautifully to that role was that kind of whole woman and complex and contradictory and not simply idealized. And it made Clara's story so much more profound and moving.
Becca was she really was singular in the way she sort of approached everything. I mean, she was the perfect colleague. Nothing was about her. Everything was about the work we were all doing together. She could not have been more generous and kind.
I'm so happy, I'm afraid I'll die here in your arms. What would you do if I died like this right now here in your arms? That we ever should have met is a miracle.
No, inevitable.
An inevitable, yes, but I confess it was the look.
The look.
The sadness in your eyes that day when we glanced at each other in the
We were both
park.
unhappy.
Unhappiness can be seductive.
You pitied me.
how quickly pity leads to love.
All this happiness, merely from a glance in the park. So much happiness, so much love.
I thought I knew what love was.
I wish we might have met so much sooner. I could have
Thought I knew what love was. I thought I knew how much I could feel.
All the time we
I
lost.
didn't know what love
I never knew
was,
what love
but
was,
now
but now
I
I
do. Is what I feel with you. The happiness I feel with you.
so much happiness.
You are so beautiful.
Happening by chance in a park.
Not by chance, by necessity,
Surely this is happiness.
by the sadness that we saw in each
No
other.
one else has ever felt before.
Just another love story. That's what they would claim. Another simple love story. Aren't all of them the same?
No, but this is more. We feel more.
This is so much more. Like every other love story. Some say happiness comes and goes. Then this happiness is a kind of happiness no one really knows. I thought I knew what love
I only heard what
was.
love
I thought it
was.
was no more than a name for yearning.
I thought it was what kindness became.
I'm learning
I thought where there was love, there was shame.
that with you
But with you,
there's just happiness.
endless happiness.
For me, Becca was a voice first before I ever even met her. She was the voice that I was listening to for all of growing up and all through college. And I thought, that sounds like me, but she's better. And I loved how authentic, how real, and how effortless her voice sounded. I had never heard a soprano in musical theater that I was like, wait, it sounds so easy. And of course, anyone who is a singer knows that in order to make you think that it's effortless, it takes so much work. Becca and I got to do a concert together in New Jersey. So we had an entire car ride from Manhattan, Upper West Side, all the way to New Jersey. And we talked so much about ingenues and being pigeonholed as ingenues and people, what they think ingenues are and how they're so sweet and so innocent and how we both were like, you know, not talking sweet and innocent in the car. And that's what we bond over, is the fact that the ingenues are also brave and courageous and I can't say what I want to say, and cool, and they're and fearless. We also joked about the fact they never really get to be funny. So how you can find places where there can be some humor and things. So we bonded over talking about it's the joy of being able to work as an ingenue, but also the fight that we would have of being pigeonholed as these as sweet and innocent. So when I was doing Phantom of the Opera for the 25th anniversary on Broadway, I came up with this idea to invite all of the women who had played Christine from the very beginning of its 25 years to obviously 25 years. And so I wrote to each of these women, never thinking in a million years Rebecca Luker will show up. I didn't know her at this point. I never thought Rebecca Luker will come. you better believe Rebecca Luker showed up. And she sat with us in that tiny little Kristin dressing room. And so my first thought was, I cannot believe how amazing this is that Rebecca Luker is here. And all the Kristins, all of us looked to Becca as like the most incredible. Her voice, her acting, the whole thing, her beauty, her ethereal beauty. And I just remember how funny she was. And I remember her talking about the mishaps that would happen when she was doing Phantom. Personally, I think that Rebecca Luker's Think of Me is unrivaled. Once again, it's effortless. It sounds like just bells. And then, I think the cadenza specifically at the end, it just was so, it sounds exactly like what you imagine Kristin would be feeling in that moment. It's so pure. No wonder the Phantom fell in love with that voice.
Think of me fondly when we've said goodbye. Remember me every so often, promise me you'll try. On that day, that not so distant day, when you are far away and free, if you ever find a moment, spare a thought for me. Always clear that this was never meant to be. If you happen to remember, stop and think of me. Think of August when the world was green. Don't think about the way things might have been. Think of me waking silent and resigned. Imagine me trying too hard to put you from my mind. Think of me, please say you'll think of me, whatever else you choose to do. There will never be a day when I won't think of you. Flowers fade, the fruits of summer fade, they have their season, so do we. But please promise me that sometimes you will think.
Right now, 25,000 Americans are living with ALS.
A deadly neurodegenerative disease
that provides an almost insurmountable challenge
for patients and their families.
That's today.
That's today.
But we envision a future world in which no one dies.
No one dies from ALS.
Target ALS is breaking down barriers
and bringing together the right people and resources
to accelerate drug discovery and development.
Target ALS's collaborative model, involving leaders in academia, research, and industry,
has already led to an area of promising, innovative therapeutic approaches.
Together, we can take this work to the next level.
We can achieve transformative breakthroughs on behalf of our friends and loved ones.
Will you join us too?
Consider making a donation today
at targetals.org.
Together, we can do this.
Wow, I don't know how many years ago it was, but I just remember performing with Rebecca, the great Rebecca Luker, and a piece that was composed, I think, for the ballet called Val Swell. In any case, it was we did get to perform it at the American Ballet Theater in the Coke Theater. It was awesome. During the rehearsal period, it was funny because we had such a little time to put it together, and we were learning all this music. And Rebecca and I kept looking at each other like, oh God, I hope I remember these words and these harmonies. But we finally made it through. And to be on that stage, to be with someone that I love so much, and to actually accomplish what we had set out to do, it was a great moment. She's also one of these people that you know, she's such a, she's this soprano that everyone a lot of times think is so pristine and sometimes a little bit intimidated to actually sit down and talk with. But she was so laid back. You felt so welcomed, and she was accessible. We did talk about our backgrounds a lot, talked about the food that we ate, things like that, but also the intimidation of being here in New York City, not only as a performer, but an attitude that I guess, you know, the North and the South, it's different. It's different.
I hear music when I look at you, a beautiful theme of every dream I ever knew. Down deep in my heart, I hear it play. I feel it start, then melt away. I hear music when I touch your hand, a beautiful melody from some enchanted land. Down deep in my heart, I hear it say, is this the day? I alone have heard this lonely strain. I alone have heard this glad refrain. Must it be forever inside of me? Why can't I let it go? Why can't I let you know? Why can't I let you know the song my heart would sing? That beautiful rhapsody of love and youth and spring. The music is sweet, the words are true, the song is you.
Becca inspired an entire generation of women in theater who looked up to her and appreciated how vibrantly she lived. Even now, her impact continues in a very deep sense through the women that she mentored, like Tony Award winners Kelli O'Hara and Laura Benanti. Becca led by example, creating space for those who came up after her. These women, now stars in their own right, remember the kindness that Becca showed them when they were first starting out. They've continued the pattern, nurturing the young women in theater who now look up to them. In this way, Becca's spirit echoes throughout the community, and her legacy will continue to be felt for generations to come.
You know, Rebecca was one of these performers who you fell so in love with her on the stage, but if you had the privilege of knowing her off the stage, there was an inspiration there for us who were wishful and hopeful sopranos to be working in her footsteps, you know, to be filling those shoes at some day, that dream. But it was how she behaved to us as a person, as Becca, that I think taught me the most. I think that we learn how to be in this business because we've seen examples of the right way to be before us. We both come from these places where it's been better to be quiet and be silent about a lot of issues that we care deeply about. And not just off stage, but on stage, we're often playing someone who's passive and meant to look a certain way and say nothing. And it's hard to do that when you have a lot of passion in your heart, but then to double that with sort of where you come from and what you're expected not to say. And I think Becca was one of those people who started using her voice, her real voice, not an actor voice, not a show voice, but her voice in pursuit of justice and the betterment of society. With examples like hers, it emboldens us to speak up and learn and educate ourselves. And she was definitely, again, this is something that feels like it's very present now, but she's been doing it for a long time. She did it for a long time. We know that it's uncomfortable for people to see as something other than Nellie Forbush or, you know, Marion the librarian or whatever it is. We know that, but it's our lives. We can't afford to not live them. And I think that singing things that aren't always the expected thing, like maybe today I could have sung Goodnight My Someone, because to me that would have been full of heart and sincerity and genuine feeling. And I would have loved to, and it would have been easy. But this song, Not Funny, was written for Becca to sing. It was written for her, and she sings it so incredibly on her album with Sally. And when Stephen suggested it to me, I said, that's what I'm going to sing, because she inspires me to be something, to think a little differently and to do fun things outside the box. And I hope to have it in my repertoire now forever.
I've searched high and low, I've looked near and far for something droll and jovial in the soprano repertoire. It seems to me that when the notes climb higher on the staff, it becomes less likely that anyone will laugh. I rode on carousels and spent some time in Oklahomas. I sailed on showboats and I loved some music men. If there's one thing that it taught me, if there's one thing that I know, I'll sing my ass off, but Ado Annie steals the show. She's funny. Laurie, she's not funny. I could have danced all night and no one would have cracked a smile. Some of my favorite things won't ever get a rise, so we hang our hopes on one song, yep, glitter and be gay. But wouldn't it be loverly if someone had the guts to say, not funny? That song's not funny, unless you're Kristin. I'll never find a funny song, I fear, because it's just so goddamn hard to land a joke up here. Knock, knock. Two guys walk into a bar. That's what she said. Maybe when we sing this high, the vowels all distort the rhyming. Maybe all the writers think sopranos don't have good timing. And so I give you all your spoonful of saccharin and dated love songs, always earnest and sincere. I'll hold a note so purely that no one else would dare. But let some bitch just belt it out and you forget I'm there. Why? She's funny. Belting's funny. So listen, little mixy mix soubrette. Go get your laughs, but I know that is all you're gonna get. 'Cause no matter how you try, you'll never fucking ever sing this.
As Kelli pointed out, people looked up to Becca not only because of who she was as a performer, but because of who she was as a person. Her ability to balance her work life with her family life was particularly admired. You see, the most important thing in Becca's life was her family. Through thick and through thin, she was a devoted wife and stepmother who loved her stepsons as her own. Becca's nurturing capacity extended beyond her home too. At the theater, the kids in her show gravitated towards her because she knew how to relate to them. She didn't talk down to them, but she also didn't hesitate to be playful and goofy around them. They loved her winning combination of warmth and silliness. 7 out of the 9 Broadway shows that Becca did had kids in them. But the very first time she worked directly with children on a Broadway stage was in The Secret Garden. Daisy Eagan was just 11 years old when she played Mary Lennox and won a Tony Award for her performance in The Secret Garden. Even at such a young age, Becca made an impression on her that she'll never forget.
There was really nobody like Rebecca. She really radiated kindness and warmth just by being. When I was lucky enough to work with Rebecca, my mother was very sick and she was dying, it turns out. And I don't know that I would have made it without my cast of The Secret Garden, and specifically Rebecca. She was definitely a mother figure. And of course, the songs that she sang in The Secret Garden were like therapeutic for me. And just the idea that people live on after death, I think, was necessary in my own journey. And to have Rebecca be that person, I think, really helped to shape who I am. There was something about losing Rebecca that hit me in a different way. And what I think it is that we're so incredibly lucky to get the time that we have with people. And I think that might be a lesson that I learned from Rebecca and Danny both. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes someone's absence to remind you of how precious their presence is, how absolutely lucky we all are to have had her in our lives. And now I'd like to present Tam Mutu and Howard McGillin singing probably the most beautiful song from The Secret Garden, Lily's Eyes.
Strangely quiet, but now the storm simply rests to strike again. Standing, waiting, I think of her. I think of strange, this Mary, she leaves the room, yet remains, she lingers on. Something stirs me to think of her. I think of her. From death she casts her spell. All night we hear her sighs. And now a girl has come who has her eyes. She has her eyes. The girl has Lily's hazel eyes. Those eyes that saw him happy long ago. Those eyes that gave him life and hope he'd never known. How can he see the girl and miss those hazel? She has her eyes. The girl has Lily's hazel eyes. Those eyes that closed and left me all alone. Those eyes I feel will never ever let me go. How can I see this girl who has her hazel eyes? In Lily's eyes a castle this house seemed to be, and I her bravest knight became, my lady fair was she. She has her eyes, she has my Lily's hazel eyes. those eyes that loved my brother, never me. Those eyes that never saw me, never knew I longed to hold her close, to live at last in Lily's eyes.
Imagine me a lover.
I longed for the day she'd turn and see me standing there.
Would God had let her stay.
She has her eyes. She has Lily's hazel eyes.
Those eyes that saw me happy long ago. How can I now forget that once I dared to be in love, alive and whole, in Lily's eyes, in Lily's eyes.
Thank you all for joining us tonight to celebrate the legacy of the brilliant, multifaceted, incredible Rebecca Luker. And thank you too for helping support the fight against ALS. Every dollar received from your ticket sale will go to ALS research. And it's not too late to give a little more to advance research that much further. Just text the number on your screen or visit targetals.org. Now it seems fitting to end with a nod to perhaps the most admirable of all of Becca's many wonderful qualities, her generosity of spirit. This generosity is exemplified by her rapport with her understudies. Not only were they often welcome to observe her actually learning the role in the rehearsal room, but she would graciously share notes and blocking updates with them throughout the process without being asked. She was not someone to hold on to any role with any sense of possessiveness or ownership. Instead, she would sometimes refer to the role as ours, implying that the character was shared by both her and her understudies. In one very famous case, Becca's Sound of Music understudy Laura Benanti went on to take over the role of Maria and become one of Broadway's most celebrated stars. 5 years later, Becca took over the role of Claudia in 9 after Laura Benanti left the show. She had no qualms about replacing, even when she was replacing for someone who had previously been her own understudy. And so it is only fitting that in our final performance of the night, Laura Benanti will sing Unusual Way from that incredible show. Thank you, Laura, for helping us to close the evening with a song that reflects the gratitude and appreciation so many of us feel for having Becca Luker in our lives. Have a good night.
I met Rebecca Luker in 1997 when I was 18 years old. My first job on Broadway was understudying her. And I'll never forget seeing her for the first time in real life. I had listened to Secret Garden on repeat. Becca was the reason why I felt like there was a place for me in the theater. Most voices that I heard were, belting. And Becca was like a soprano angel in a sea of belters. And I thought, well, if she can do it, maybe I can too. And to understudy her, I was so nervous. I didn't know, I wasn't like an insider in the biz, so I didn't know what she was like in real life. And I will never forget, she was wearing khaki pants and like a pull-up, like a zip-up hoodie. And she came over to me and she threw her arms around me and said, Laura, I'm so happy to meet you. And I'm so excited we get to play this part together. And that doesn't happen. That is extremely unusual. She was a light in this world. She was like an angel on earth, truly. She showed legions of sopranos that you can have fire and grit and nuance and humor, and you can do it all while being kind and helpful and a member of a community, not just a star. She and I have shared a lot of songs, one of them being Unusual Way, which is a decidedly romantic song, but there are some lines that just speak to my full heart in terms of how I feel about Becca. I know that she is looking down on all of us and that heaven has never sounded more beautiful.
In a very unusual way, one time I needed you. In a very unusual way, you were my friend. Maybe it lasted a day, maybe it lasted an hour, but somehow it will never end. In a very unusual way, I think I'm in love with you. In a very unusual way, I want to cry. Something inside me goes weak. Something inside me surrenders, and you're the reason why. You're the reason why. You don't know what you do to me. You don't have a clue. You can't tell what it's like to be me looking at you. It scares me so that I can hardly speak. In a very unusual way, I am what I am to you. Though at times it appears I won't stay, I never go. Special to me in my life, since the first day that I met you. How could I ever forget you once you had touched my soul? In a very unusual way, you've made me whole. Good night, my someone. Good night, my love. Sleep tight, my someone. Sleep tight, my love. Our star is shining its brightest light. For good night, my love. For good night. Sweet dreams be yours, dear, if dreams there be. Sweet dreams to carry you close to me. I wish they may, and I wish they might. Now good night, my someone, good night. True love can be whispered from heart to heart when love